All right, we are live. Welcome to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales. I don't know how I feel about doing these once a week anymore. It feels like I have not done one of these in forever. We had it last week with our good friends David and Eric Ron. Great conversation. That's going to be on our YouTube shortly, but we might have to pick up the pace of these just a little as I settle into my new role in my day job. Hopefully we'll figure out a good schedule to get these coming out to you. But for the most part, you're going to see these most Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, some Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, and then just any other day where we can get guests. But they're always going to be around 6:30 p.m. Eastern. If you miss them, in about 2 weeks after the episode, you can find those on our YouTube at youtube.com/wait, that's not the right address. youtube.com/elevate your grind. Of course, the live episodes are always right here on facebook.com/cannabusiness group. We've got a great episode coming for you next week. I don't want to pronounce this person's name wrong. We have David Snopoli on Thursday at 6:30 p.m. We're just messing everything up here today. And then we've got some great episodes coming for you next week as well. Definitely stay tuned here all the time. We've got an awesome panel coming up next month on edibles. You can check that out. Join CLab.com. Register for the event. Use the code CLAB100. It will get you in. All right. So my guest today works for one of the biggest PE groups in cannabis. He went straight from college to the cannabis industry, kind of like, going straight from high school to the MBA, but a little bit more fun and a little bit more exciting. And what this person does not know is, in a roundabout way, he is somewhat responsible for the creation of this podcast. And I'll share that story with him in just a second, because I don't think he actually knows it. Please welcome from Entourage Effect Capital, Laurence Horowitz. LJ, thanks for joining, man.
Wow. I mean, that was a hell of an introduction, Todd. I mean, definitely putting some respect on my name, as Jimmy Butler would say. The MBA in Miami, you're putting respect, saying I'm coming straight from high school to the MBA, going college straight to the cannabis industry. Couldn't think of a more affectionate and really appreciative connection there. So thank you. And I'm definitely excited to hear this story.
So I can share this now because I'm no longer under agreement. I was up for the same job as you at Entourage Effect. And I worked for a very, very bad person. We don't need to get into that started to put the kibosh on it. But you know what? The cards fell the way they did. And because I didn't get that opportunity, not saying that I would have beat you out anyway, but I started this show. And I'm glad that you found the position in Entourage. I know that the team there loves you, and you had been there before me doing an internship. So I'm glad that it worked out for you. And hey, man, we wouldn't be sitting here having that conversation if that bullshit event did not happen, but it actually turns out to be a great event. And I've made some great friends at Entourage Effect. You work for a great team. So in a roundabout way, man, you getting that job had me start this podcast, and I thank you for that.
It's just weird how the universe works, isn't it?
It is, man.
Sometimes things just come together.
But yeah, dude, so you work for I think this is cool as shit. You went straight from college, and I listened to the podcast that you were on with RJ. So I know that you had kind of been involved in the cannabis space beforehand with some of the things you did, and I want to get into that. But your first, we'll call it, real adult job out of college was in the cannabis space. Like, you didn't have to go through any of the bullshit that a lot of other people go through. Not only did you go straight from college to the cannabis space, you went from college to doing investments in the cannabis space, man. That's got to be an absolute awesome feeling.
It's definitely, sometimes I have to step back and just take a look at where I've come, and, but that's, really what I want to see. And, what the club I started in college, what its main goal is, we want to get rid of all the BS that comes with getting into the cannabis industry. And, we want kids when they're 7 or 8 years old to say, hey, I want to work in the cannabis industry. We want this to be a legitimate thing. And, we need people like myself, smart people that are going to enter the industry at a young age and set examples for, kids in college, kids in high school, to show, this isn't just an industry where people are sitting around getting high all day. This is an industry where we need people that are, really respect the product, but at the same time are willing to put in the hours and, have the brain power to get it done.
Dude, I love it because all it is another thing that people can be passionate about and follow their passion into the industry. And I like to think that every year it gets a little easier to get into the space. It goes from, you look at like the NFL, right? You want to be a quarterback in the NFL, there's only 32 spots, right? So
Yep.
as the cannabis industry grows and expands, as you guys fund more companies that blow up and turn into unicorns, there's more jobs for everybody in this space. But let's actually circle back. So you started a club at the University of Michigan on the cannabis industry. Like, dude, how did you have the wherewithal to even approach that? Because I can tell you when I was in college, I would maybe start a club to like talk to people about cannabis, but I don't even know if I could have went to the university to make something officially sanctioned.
So I'm definitely not going to take all the credit here because I was part of the founding group, but I eventually took over as president for the next 2 years. But as part of the founding group, we had about 8 to 10 kids that were, seeing things in Michigan that we really just thought other people weren't seeing. The cannabis space medically was blowing up around us, and we wanted to find a way to get involved. And we were kind of shocked that the university wasn't paying attention to it, frankly. We had a professor in the School of Pharmacology, Dr. Gus Rosania, who is also super interested in the subject and is one of the few professors that has a license to study the Schedule I drug, cannabis. And he helped us start the club at the Ross School of Business, where we really pitched ourselves as a cannabis business club, not a cannabis club. It's a cannabis business club. We really, we put together a pitch deck. We showed it to the Ross School of Business, showed how this is a business. We need to teach this in the school. We need to get kids involved. And there's tons of alumni that are involved. They kind of laughed at us at first. As the club grew, it was just funny how, the Ross School just became so appreciative of what we were doing because we were starting to bring in donors, starting to bring back alumni. It's become this huge thing now. So,
Was
it
there
really
pushback
started.
from the university? Was there
Oh,
pushback from
tremendous.
the university?
Yeah, absolutely. When we started the club, it was, laughed at. We were put in the corner of club fairs. We were given the smallest room. Um, you know, they didn't want this to succeed, but now that it is succeeding, I think they want to take complete advantage of it, as any educational institution would and has been doing during this COVID age we've been seeing. So it's just crazy, and like I said, it really evolved from just a cannabis business awareness type of club to let's get kids jobs in this industry. Let's get smart kids jobs in this industry.
Very cool, man. I almost picture you guys like the group from old school, except for the fact that you were actually students, where it was, at the end of the day, if you looked at old school, it was a place for the misfits and everybody else to fit in, even though they were all about parties and everything else like that. But, I imagine like there was a Dean Pritchard who was there and he just didn't want you guys to succeed and like had you in the janitor's closet and everything else. But you guys persevered and it became a respectable club within the School of Business, which is absolutely incredible. So what was it like at the beginning trying to recruit people for the club? I mean, did you have to weed through, and there's going to be a ton of puns in this industry. It just happens. And I hate when I go over them. But did you have to weed through a lot of people that were probably assumed it was somewhat of a stoner club and say like, no, listen, this isn't about products. This isn't about smoking. This is about the actual business and how you can get involved in the industry.
Yeah, so I would say, that's kind of how our club transitioned from when I started to when I, finished at school. So when I started at the club, the people in charge, part of the founding group, we kind of worked as a team and we were kind of marketing the club to stoners, which we realized was kind of a problem. So, we would have, rolling papers with our, logo on it. We do lighters. We did cosmic brownies, which are, like just the little Debbie's brownies.
Delicious.
They're awesome. They're really cheap
Yeah.
too. If you ever need to give out something at a fair, great idea. And they never go bad. My parents will tell you I still have 100 at my house. But we realized that, yeah, we were getting a lot of stoners and, people that really weren't motivated to work and just kind of saw cannabis and were like, wow, this is really cool. But at the same time, I think that's also the same thing with a lot of other clubs at the University of Michigan, but just not necessarily with cannabis. You have a ton of clubs at the Raw School of Business, and the key that makes them so great is, you have to have a low acceptance rate, or, you have to have an application process. And, just having all these kids come through just kind of makes Green Wolverine look better, because we got to, eventually, once we pivoted our focus and started, really becoming a more selective group that was focused on cannabis business with, 30 dedicated members as opposed to 110 super non-dedicated members, it really changed focus, and it really just showed, what we could become, because now a lot of these people that were in this 30 group last year have jobs in cannabis.
Interesting. So you mentioned your parents and the Cosmic Brownies. What was the feedback from your parents when you're like, hey, I founded a cannabis club at the University of Michigan?
So, my parents are awesome. First of all, they're like my best friends. I mean, I don't know how many other 22, 23-year-olds during quarantine, are able to say that they lived for 6 months and worked full time in their house and, got along with their parents. Right now I'm not home. I'm actually on vacation in Telluride at a friend's house, but working remotely. But we just have a great relationship. My mom actually does executive recruiting at Peloton, and she's been a recruiter her whole life. And, she's always told me, do what you want to do. Like, don't let anybody tell you, don't do this, don't do that. And I was a sport management major, business entrepreneurship minor at University of Michigan. And when I went to school, I originally thought I was going to be a sports agent or work in sports. Terrible idea.
You wanted to be Ari Gold, didn't you?
I wanted to be Ari Gold. Exactly. Who doesn't want to be like
this is just a Jeremy Piven themed podcast right
now. Yeah, and I realized sports are for like douchebags, like you gotta, it's just a really hard industry. You're working 18-hour days. You're not getting paid that much. It wasn't for me. So I needed to find like a niche. I needed to find something. And my friend Luke and I, like, we were part of this founding group, and we just couldn't, we were making some investments on the side. This was when Robinhood was first coming out. So they had cannabis public markets on there. We're making investments, making money. We're like, nobody's paying attention to this. This is the dumbest thing ever. We need to start meeting people in this industry. And so we started talking to people in the Ann Arbor community, getting involved with things like Hash Bash, which is super popular in Ann Arbor. And it just kind of, telling my parents was kind of just easy. It's not like my parents have ever been against smoking. And it's not like I was, a big smoker in high school either. That was, something that probably came on a little bit more in college, but they were never the parents that were like, oh, we're going to ground you for this. So it wasn't as hard as, I would say probably the typical, kid might have. So I'm probably lucky there.
It's funny how a lot of us that probably become regular cannabis smokers later in life, we really didn't start doing it until there was actual true stress in our life, right? I mean, similar to you, I tried it for the first time ever in high school, dabbled with it in college, but it wasn't until I got my first job in sales where I'd have a high stress environment where I actually noticed the effects that it had on me. So it's interesting. And as the more and more I interview people on the show and go through the industry, like people were truly using it as a way to disconnect and a way to deal with the stress of life versus, listen, when I was 16 years old, 15 years old, I didn't have any real stress that required cannabis. So it's funny that way. And I think, talking about your parents, I think your mom said that she was going to be watching this. I saw this on LinkedIn. So let's say hi to her. I'm a Peloton customer. So thank you for doing what you do. I'm probably going to try to get a ride in after this. But back to you, sir. It's crazy that you were able to have that kind of foresight to do that in college. And if I recall correctly from the interview I listened to, that actually led to your first job in the industry with a different investment fund.
Yeah. So my friend Luke and I, we decided, after noticing how many University of Michigan alumni were involved just in the cannabis industry and in Michigan specifically, that we were going to start a career prospecting committee within Green Wolverine that was solely focused on getting kids jobs. So connecting kids with leaders in the industry, and then bringing in leaders to have meetings for recruitment or really just education, or really just bringing them on panels, and also that, getting them as sponsors. So this was my first opportunity to really raise money too. So this was a good, learning experience there as well. And when we got these people to come in for career prospecting opportunities, the first people we brought in was this guy, Matt Wolf, and this guy, Spencer Sommer, who I love. These are great guys. They run Wolf Venture Capital. They have a great full spectrum CBD product out there called Ueva, if you haven't heard of it. I used to sell for Ueva too, kind of running their sales, ran a sales team there last summer. But I really got good experience there. So I met them, kind of got them to invest in Green Wolverine or donate to Green Wolverine a little bit. And they were so impressed by Luke and I when we met with them that they were like, we want to both give you jobs. We were sophomores in college at the time, and we were like, this is ridiculous. We want to be. I wanted to still be a sports agent at the time. Luke's like, I'm going into investment banking. Like, screw these guys. Middle of the summer, I contacted them from my, my recruiting internship. I was doing financial services recruiting, which honestly was really boring, but was probably the best internship I had because it taught me how to stalk people really well professionally, which is really weird to say, but it was a really, really good opportunity. So back to Matt Wolf though. So I sent them an email over the summer that I was, interested in potentially working for them during the school year since I had a pretty light load. And I started, doing 10 hours a week for them. And then they brought me to MJ BizCon, and I secured some investments for them. And they brought me on more so as a 20 hours a week during the school year. And then I worked for them 40 hours a week full-time last summer, half, doing business development for their, venture fund, and then half doing sales for one of their portfolio companies, Ueva. And it was just a great experience.
Very cool, man. Was MJ BizCon your first cannabis conference that you went to?
It was, and it was a spectacle.
Must have been mind-blowing.
It was really funny. And it was definitely the moment I said to myself, yeah, this is for me. I can do this. Because, it's, I don't know, what is that? MJ BizCon 2018, I guess now.
Okay. Yeah.
So the industry was, blowing up at this time. Lots of crazy money being thrown around, lots of crazy companies. And I remember saying to my boss, this is this is the Big Short. People are running around, just throwing money at everything. People lighting it on fire. And I'm like, it's going to be funny to see who survives this in 2 years or, 5 years. And, you can already see, it's already starting to whittle itself down. But, I'm pretty confident that once there's legalization, it'll prop back up again. But
no, I definitely agree with you, man. I mean, I think a lot of people came into this space and they didn't understand what it was going to be like. And a lot of investors were I don't want to say they were throwing money around like a drunken sailor, but they were supporting companies that just to me it just didn't seem right. They didn't seem like the ones that should be backed. And there was they're the ones that were kind of treating cannabis like the tech space, right? And at the end of the day, when you are a retail company, you're an agricultural company, you can't spend money like Uber or Facebook or Google, right? It doesn't work that way. And you know that 100 times more than I do. But then there were the other small local dispensaries, and we had talked to these people because I spent a little bit of time in VC in this space. And they'd be like, listen, we're staying in our lane. We're staying here. We're going to expand in the state. We're going to make this store profitable, and then we're going to make that store profitable. And then after, we're cash flow positive, we're going to look at other states and we'll expand. And I'm like, why is that the rarity right now? Why is it the rarity that people are taking this strategy? Because that's how you've built businesses forever. And now we're seeing all those, not all the initial players, but a lot of those initial players are crashing and burning. They're running out of money. And we're starting to see the second wave of multi-state operators come to fruition that just stayed in their lane. It's really interesting to me. And you joined EEC right before we'll call it the first bubble popped, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And I'm sure, I know you can't go into too much there, but I'm sure though the second group of companies that I mentioned are the ones that you guys are excited to talk to.
Definitely. I mean, like I said before, we're just super excited, and specifically I'm super excited of what the cannabis industry has to hold over the next 5 years. I mean, I think there's no way that federal legalization doesn't happen in the next 3 years, just because of how much money I think the government is going to need based on everything with COVID and just, bringing in revenues a different way. We've seen it be successful in, Colorado and, California to an extent. But I'm very excited for everything that the future has to hold for this industry. And I'm excited to see who's going to win in this industry also. And I think, I don't want to get into particulars, but, when we start to see cannabis beverages really blow up and who wins that game and, who wins the cannabis pre-roll game and just who is producing the best product and who is understanding the consumer. Because, one of the gripes I have with the industry right now is I really don't think it understands the consumer at all. And that's something I've kind of talked about before, specifically at Green Wolverine stuff. I didn't really get into it with RJ, but definitely a passion point of mine is that especially the medical industry right now, really don't think has a grip on how to market to patients. And, the recreational market, I think, is also kind of struggling with that too. So when they start to understand these consumers more, whichever company is able to do that, I think is probably going to win.
All right. So I wanted to jump back over to your career so far, but I kind of like where you're going with this, right? I agree with you. I think that, a lot of companies knew there was a built-in consumer base already, right? Because there is a black market. This is the first time, I think, and I could be wrong, that a new industry is essentially created around an existing industry that just happened to be illegal. I think the only other example of this we can look at was alcohol when it was during Prohibition and then post-Prohibition, right? There were people who were drinking throughout Prohibition. So we look at it, and I've had this conversation with people you probably know, Morgan and Emily Paxia, that
Yep.
when this industry reaches maturity or starts to get there, the adult use market will actually be the smallest part of it. Next, we're going to have a wellness component. We're going to have a medical component, all the way through industrial hemp, right? And when we look back at it, the adult use market's going to be like that. And I think that a lot of companies right now are going after the low-hanging fruit because there is a built-in consumer base, and they're like, okay, let's market to them because it's going to get us sales. But I think the forward-thinking companies, and that's part of why I did this podcast, that are looking at the general public that don't consume cannabis yet, that are alcohol consumers, that are wellness consumers, that actually have a medical need for this. I had Erica Daniels from Hope Grows for Autism here. The autistic community, I think those communities eventually are going to be much larger consumers of cannabis, maybe in a different form than the adult use market right now. So that's my theory. I'm interested to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I'm just huge on the elderly right now. I'm really big on, how much the elderly are going to get into the cannabis market. And I'm also huge on moms. I think women in cannabis are about to be just a humongous community. I mean, they already are. I think a Kerner released a report that they're 51% of the consumer market for cannabis. I'm not sure if that's right. I'll check it up after later. But, the moms that are having a glass of wine after work are going to turn into the moms that are, maybe taking a 2 milligram edible after work. That this isn't going to get them drunk. They're not going to be incapacitated to take care of their kids, but, they're going to take something to get the edge off. Like you said, experiencing the daily stress of adulthood. Not to embarrass her, but, I helped my mom said at the beginning of quarantine, she was having a little bit of sleep issues. I got her some indica, very small dose edibles, and, she sleeps like a baby now. That's like, I'm not trying to brag or anything.
I got my mom edibles too, so you don't have
My
to
grandma is,
that.
Who is a conservative Trump supporter. She loves the cannabis, what is it called? Cream. She puts it on her arthritis, and she loves it. Would she ever smoke? No, but she's a consumer. You got to market. How do you market to her? To me, it's just interesting hearing her say, I'm not going to take this unless a doctor tells me exactly what to do. So we as cannabis companies need to understand how to get to these people and how to sell to them.
Dude, I couldn't agree with you more, right? We look at the traditional cannabis marketing, and it's marketing to, almost, and someone from your school, the Barstool crowd, right? It's marketed to younger people. It's marketed to people who go out and
Barstool and like seniors.
Yeah. You don't see a brand that appeals to the elderly, and we're now starting to see brands that appeal to the working female and the at-home mom and everything else. We're starting to see that. You guys, and this is public knowledge, have an investment in a great company called I've spoken to Jake many times, but I think companies like Can, and I'm going to mention them. There are other beverage companies that I'm friendly with House of Saka, Province Brands. But I think a company like Can truly represents at least the closest next step in this industry, because now we're putting cannabis in a form where it's more socially well, I can't speak. Socially, it's accepted by people when you're out in public. That's what I meant to say. But you can drink it out in public. You're not sparking a joint and pissing off everybody around you, because no matter it's a joint, a cigar, or a cigarette, no matter what you're lighting, it's going to smell and it's going to be invasive. So I'm really excited. I think Can's the next step, and I'm really excited to see everything beyond that. You might know what's coming next more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about necessarily what's next, but with Can, I want to harp on just how awesome, I had my first experience with it a few weeks ago. Just the idea that, I'm not even someone that they would probably market to, as, they're looking for microdose consumers. And, as someone who's not necessarily a microdose consumer, it was definitely a refreshing beverage. And as something that's, you could pair with alcohol, is just, it's the first, I think of its kind, like the other cannabis beverages do as well. Being able to, pair it with other consumer goods is going to be huge too. And I think it's going to be, as opposed to the alcohol and tobacco companies looking at this like, oh no, we got to worry about cannabis. I think, we got to start looking at them as collaborators. Same thing with CPG as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And like I said, even still, when we look at that, that's still going to be one of the smallest parts of the industry. So we got through that. Let's kind of circle back. So you were working for a cannabis investment fund. Dude, why come and scoop my job at EEC, dude? What the hell? No, I'm kidding. But what made you want to make the jump if you're already in that space to go to another fund?
So I would say it was definitely a combination of a few things. So first, I was, going back to school, and after working full time for this company, and I'm sure because I'm not sure your whole background, but day-to-day sales is a grind. I'd been selling, this CBD product, to mom and pop shops and mom and pop pharmacies pretty much all across the country for about a year. And, I was pretty burnt out, I will say. And then there was also the, thought, I could probably go to a bigger company at this point. Like I want to do something more with cannabis specifically, not CBD. I want to be, more focused on the investment side. I don't want to just be selling something. I don't want to be working for the portfolio company. And, it was a big move, but, I quit, and it was, no love lost. Like I said, I'm still good friends with both Matt and Spencer. And I started looking for jobs. Thankfully, I had, a really nice built-in intro with Green Wolverine. So, I'd reach out to all the cannabis PE funds that I liked, and, all the cannabis operators that I really thought were respectable companies, with the intro of, run the first and biggest cannabis business club at Raw School of Business, Michigan. I'd love to talk to you about, potentially getting on a panel or learning more about what you do or anything like that, just as an intro. And, usually I was able to parlay something like that into, hey, I'm not, I don't have any plans for next summer. Let's, talk about something. So that was kind of how EEC happened. EEC, I mean, I reached out to all the partners. One of them got back to me, and it was just kind of history from there. It wasn't like I applied to a job. It wasn't a very formal process. And my friends all make fun of me because they say, LJ, you've never actually like applied for a job. Like you've never actually you've never done the formal, like you said, you didn't go through all the BS. And I'm like, isn't that the great part about it though? Like, didn't I just yeah.
If I can make you feel better, I'm 34 years old, and I just now for the first time got a job in the traditional way, where I applied through a job posting, went through the interview process, and got it. So, I mean, maybe you have something in your future 10 years from now, but yeah, it took me till 34 to actually get a job in the traditional manner.
But to be fair, you should, I mean, just like my mom tells me this all the time, you shouldn't be getting jobs in the traditional manner. Like, you shouldn't be applying to a job that has, 500 applicants and expecting them to read your application. So you got to make warm connections. You got to be a real person. Cody talks about that all the time. I really like to practice what she preaches because I think she's really smart. So I agree with her. You're not going to just get in with these cold emails. Or,
Yeah, dude. Are you allowed to say which managing partner got back to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It was Dove Sapiro. Yeah,
Okay.
I he, I think because I said something about potentially Israel or my Jewish heritage because I knew he was from Israel, or had Israeli background, and I think that caught his eye. And then I talked to him, and I talked to everybody, got cycled through, and it was just started working. I mean, I offered to work for them for free, kind of just as an intern, and that's how I got started.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. No, you've got a great team there between Cody and Matt and Tiff and Dub and everybody else. So I know that team very well. I've stayed friends with them. Cody, like you said, man, I love what she does. I love all of her content and everything else. I recently found out that she's slightly younger than me, which I thought she was a little bit older than me.
I don't know
But
how it's possible. Every time I remember what her age is, I'm like, oh my god, I mean, she's done more than I'll probably do in the rest of my life. And she's just such a hoss. Like she's awesome. She's a great boss.
dude, I not trying to blow up your spot here, Cody, but I thought you were like 37, 38, just like a few years older than me. And then I saw her post on LinkedIn or on Instagram, like going into 34. I'm like, shit, I turned 34 like 3 months ago. She's old. She's younger than me. I'm like, here I was looking up to somebody who I thought was older than me and she's younger than me. It's still, but that was kind of like a little aside, but I still think it's great content. It must be, really cool to work for someone that driven every day.
Yeah, seriously, and it motivates me too, like to have like a boss who not only cares just so much, but is also just like, and she's gonna get embarrassed for me for saying this. She's just so cool. Like she's just a cool person to talk to learn from, and she just has, like you said, just so much experience in her young life that I'm able to learn from. That's been great so far. So couldn't really have asked for a better real first boss, I would say.
Very cool, man. Yeah. And, Matt and Tiff, not that I don't love you guys too. You're just not as public facing as Cody. So we're going to call her out right now. But like I said, you've got a great team there. So you got the gig in Entourage, man. What has that been like? So I'm guessing you started sometime around September, November. So you're coming up just about a year. How has it been?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's been a year almost at Entourage is crazy. So a little known story that not a lot of people know too is that I was actually hired as an intern with my friend Daniel, who goes to not my friend, one of my best friends, Daniel. Um, gotta give him
Daniel,
a shout.
remember that when you see this interview. He only called you
Gotta
a friend at
remember
first.
that. And once they hired me, they said, we also need a financial analyst intern. Is there anyone in Green Wolverine that you know? And Daniel actually started the investment fund in Green Wolverine, which is, a separate fund that the kids kind of have some money that we have from donors to play with and invest in public
Very
cannabis
cool.
stuff. It was kind of a way to teach them. So he was the perfect candidate. We both started working probably end of October, beginning of November. And, we were both doing the grind work, and that's how you get involved. I mean, we would be sitting in the Ross University basement on a Thursday night when everybody was out, at Rick's and Skeep's partying. We'd be crunching the numbers. Daniel would be on the spreadsheet, and I'd be working the PowerPoint investment memo right next to him. And, but those were the days. Like, I'm kind of like sitting back being like, this is awesome now, thinking about this. We were doing
It
just
must have
like,
been really cool starting with your friend, though. It must have made it a whole lot easier.
absolutely. I mean, it made the transition to the team so much easier. I was really upset when, he decided that he wanted to go into the more traditional finance world that he wasn't going to stick with.
Ooh.
I know, boo, humongous boo. But I think he'll be back one day, hopefully. And he's just a great dude as well. And then, COVID hit. And at that point, I was working, probably about 20, 30 hours a week. I was only taking 3 credits my last semester at school, so it was pretty easy to work. Um, and I went home, and once I got home from school, I realized like I'm basically working full time at this point because school's over. My original start date was supposed to be after July 4th, but I just started working kind of in April and haven't really looked back. I mean, there was no transition to adulthood. I mean, my friends kind of talk about it a lot. Everybody, our year, well, I'm kind of saying now we're lucky because I feel bad for all the kids in school right now. At the time, we thought we were unlucky because we were like, oh, like, we have to just be adults right now. Like, we have to grow up right now. But It's okay. I think it's been plenty okay. And like I said, I feel much worse for the kids in school right now. And I also feel terrible for old people right now. I think they have it really tough.
I think it's interesting, right? I think it was just a different challenge when you guys graduated with it being in a global pandemic because there there are opportunities out there. I know Cody preaches this. There are opportunities to be entrepreneurial. There are opportunities if you know where to go, if you can look at the workplace and figure out what industries are actually benefiting from this pandemic. When I say benefiting, the ones that it's not stopping them. They're not breaking mortar. Tech industry, finance, cannabis, for one, that's been deemed essential. You could have been me. I had a degree in finance and I graduated right at literally a month after the housing market crashed. So I remember all of a sudden.
All the time too. She says she came out during the housing crash. And, like you said, I think there's always just an obstacle, like you're kind of saying. There's always something to contend with. There's always, an excuse. It's the people that kind of make the best of the excuse that are going to, do well.
No, 100%. I mean, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I'd still probably only be on like 30, 40 episodes of the show. And we're touching on almost 100 here now, right? Because we were able to get people like you and I would not be having this conversation if it wasn't for the pandemic. I would have hit you up and said, hey, man, when are you coming down to the Fort Lauderdale office? We'll get together. What's the next conference you're going to be at? But because we went to the pandemic and now you've got shows like the Jimmy Kimmel Show and the Tonight Show and Howard Stern are all using Zoom, people will watch this and they'll watch it the same way they watch that show, which to me is awesome. It's just, I think people like you, especially being young, you can kind of take a step back because you don't have, how do I say this the right way without pissing people off? You don't have bad habits and you don't have experience that you're used to. So when the pandemic hit for you, as from a working standpoint, I know you had experience, but there wasn't many habits to break and not much to change. You could have it was easier for you to adapt to this new way of working.
The work from home thing has always been a thing for me. I mean, I've been working remotely since, my last firm. And it's just funny because I remember like my mom saying to me, and bringing her back up again, she was saying, you need to work in an office. Like you got to get the office experience. You got to get there's a social component to it. And yeah, it's like one of the few things I like really disagree with her on. I think, the whole work from home thing makes people a lot more productive. Obviously there's a time and space for office, but I think at least for certain industries where it's not necessary, the work from home thing is great. I'm sure I don't know how you said you're back in the office, but I'm sure you enjoyed your work at home, although you do have a young child. So working at home with a young child might be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I would say from my approach, I like a hybrid approach. I like the option of being able to go into the office and kind of immersing. Going back to what I do, I'm in sales, right? So it's always what I use terrible analogies here, but what bullets can I put in the gun to bring to the next meeting, right? So for me to be in the office to kind of immerse myself in it and pick up little tidbits here and there is great, but it's also the freedom to work from home. I've always been a road warrior. I've been on the road, going to this Starbucks, working out of that restaurant, this hotel, whatever it is. So, for me, it's nice to be in the office for a little bit, especially as much I love my wife and kid, but they are very distracting during the day. So it's nice to get away and come home and do this. I like the hybrid approach, but I think everybody has their strengths and they're starting to figure that out now, right? Circling back towards the cannabis space, because we can go off on these tangents forever, man. We're looking at a new point in the cannabis space where we've been deemed essential. I like to think there's a spotlight on this industry. Like you said, you think federal legalization is going to happen in the next 3 years. I hope you're right. I think that this is the number one way that we can recover from what's going to be a recession, if not a depression. And I think it's going to start on a state by state basis. And I'd like to think, and I could be wrong because this idea just popped into my head, that a state like New York might actually lead the charge. Because when you look at New York and you look at Manhattan, listen, whoever's saying New York is dead, you're an idiot. It's never going to die. New York will never die because people will come in, they'll buy the real estate. It's always going to be Manhattan.
It hurts.
Stock market is there.
People say that. That's like my spot. I'm a Knicks, I'm Giants, I'm Yankees. I'm New York through and through. Like hearing that hurts. I got to say.
Anybody who's saying New York is dead has never spent time in New York because you know what? if half the city goes out, somebody will come in and buy half the city, and it's going to come back. There might be a little downturn for a little bit. So a part of me thinks that if New York goes adult use, or if they at least show the tax revenue that they can make, that hopefully that'll be a nice enough model that the federal government will take a look at it and say, maybe that's a good idea, right? So, I know you're a New York guy. Technically, we're Jersey guys, so people are going to get mad at us for saying that. But I would like to think that maybe New York will lead the charge. How do you see the industry kind of playing out? Do you think that we're going to go state by state by state until it's 50 states, or are we going to have federal legalization come first? By the way, this is not an official opinion. This is just how you
No,
feel.
it's totally, yeah. So I'll give you kind of a twofold answer. So I kind of talked about it on the last podcast a little bit. I really do think that Trump is volatile, and he's also smart enough to know that, announcing legalization or decriminalization for cannabis is going to bring in a lot of millennials to vote for him. I think, if this current vaccine trick that he's trying to pull, I think that's his new kind of, thing he's trying to get people to vote for him for, doesn't work. I wouldn't be surprised if he's down 12 to 15 points nationally, that he pulls this out of his back pocket and says, I'm down with, descheduling this drug. You saw that the House was already, trying to vote on the MORE Act to decriminalize, or I'm not sure if it was to legalize or decriminalize. But my prediction, I would say, like my full one would say, if Joe Biden is elected, I don't think he wants to be remembered necessarily as the person that legalized marijuana. But I don't think he's going to stand in its way. I think you're going to see tons of states legalize. I think, like you said, New York, I think the whole Northeast is going to kind of lead a charge. You're going to see New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont, they'll all legalize together. I would, kind of in a coalition type thing, start to see some interstate commerce. And then hopefully by 2022, a bill is on the floor. And there's just, too much evidence standing in the way. If, he really is, he as Biden, that is really, morally opposed to it, then we wait until 2024 with 50 states that have decriminalized. But I really don't think it gets past 2024. I can't see that. I mean, maybe I could be completely wrong, but
especially if they deschedule it first, I think, the biggest thing that's standing in our way is the descheduling, right? If we can get research around this and all the claims that everybody's making right now with unofficial research become more official, I think that's what's going to push it over the edge, right? Because at the end of the day, the stigma has been lightened, but it's certainly not gone, right? I don't know about you. Listen, I'm a cannabis user. I'm a consumer. I'm a patient, whatever you want to call it. Clearly, I have a freaking internet show that talks about what I do, my use, my involvement in the industry. I'm in the industry, but I can tell you when I go to the airport, or if I'm traveling, even if I'm going to MJ BizCon or anything else, I don't wear anything that has a leaf on it or really has anything on it, because I know I'm going to get the extra search at security. I'm going to get this, that, and the other. I mean, I was actually on a flight home from MJ BizCon, and the gentleman 2 seats to my right was wearing a hat with a leaf on it. He was the owner of a company. And I don't remember what the specific situation was, but the flight attendant gave him a whole bunch of shit about potentially having stuff on him. And all it was actually somebody else on the plane in the back that had taken a hit of the vape on the plane. But because this guy had the leaf on his hat, they automatically assumed it was him, right? So I don't know about you, but I don't do any of that stuff because I know the stigma is still real as much as I am an advocate and everything else.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think that it relates earlier to what you were saying about the kids that were joining the club that are just joining to be the stoners, or the people that just joined the industry because it's marijuana. This is what's going to change. I'm loud and proud about working in the cannabis industry on my social media, but that's cannabis business. I'm not loud and proud about how, oh, I took 6 dabs today and, just wild out. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not 420, I'm not 420 Bob Marley, Willie Nelson, dab king on Instagram. That's not my name. I'm Laurence Horowitz, cannabis business professional. I think there's 2 ways to market yourself. You know what I mean? And I just see the analogy to the people joining the club and the people joining the business. It's the same thing. And I think you can make the parallel with any industry, not just cannabis. There's people that show up professionally and there's people that show up unprofessional. That, not
No,
to say that wearing a leaf hat is bad, by the way, you know, like,
no.
but I'm just saying there's ways to promote yourself and there's ways to not. There's ways to build a brand, which, you know, you're doing. You have this great podcast, and then there's ways to not.
No, I agree with you on that. I don't think any of these things are bad. And I think, you know, the key to fighting the stigma is certainly education. Maybe I'm just not the one brave enough to be one of the pioneers. Like, I'm definitely not a Steve D'Angelo or anything else, but I try to use this platform for education. I try to get folks like you that are to help educate our audience and everything else. And I hope that between, you know, your social network, my social network, and the people we reach with the show, that if we can convince one person to convince another person to convince another person that this, you know, I had a conversation with someone at work today, and clearly I work for a cannabis company, Springvig, but they're basically saying like, yeah, there is a stigma around it. But I go, but if you were taking Zoloft to change your mood or whatever it was, that would be perfectly fine. Why? Because it comes from a pharmaceutical company. We just don't have the ability to do the research on cannabis to say this is just as good as that from an efficacy standpoint, but it's 100 times safer.
Yep. And not only that, like I was saying earlier, there's no doctor telling you that this is okay. I think a lot of people really need to, that I've been talking to, at least adults especially, need to hear from their doctor that this will not kill them. It doesn't matter if their son says it, if their wife says it, if their dad says it, it needs to be from a medical professional and not some, you know, medical marijuana doctor either. Their general physician.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. And a lot of, there are general physicians here that have gone into the cannabis side of things because they want to help people, but they're looked down upon because they're a cannabis doctor. It's like, well, they just recently went there. And that kind of stuff blows my mind, man. But we're getting towards the end of the episode here.
Yeah.
You are very, very, very involved in the cannabis space. Sure, you get to see a ton of great stuff. What excites you about the next few years in this industry? What are some of the things that you're really excited to see that are coming down the pipe? Of course, the ones that you can actually share. I'm sure there's 100 that you can't.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm not going to get into any specifics, but I think the thing I'm just really excited about, and we kind of talked about it earlier, is just how they're going to market to how different cannabis companies, specifically consumer companies, are going to market to them. You know, how are we going to, you know, market to my dad? How are we going to market to an elderly patient? How are we going to market to a female? How are we going to market to a college kid? What products are going to succeed, and also how are these products going to innovate? So, you know, when I started getting into the industry 4 years ago, the products that we had in this industry were so different. Like the vape cartridges, like I remember they had the plastic tops, and they were from China, and they, you know, probably make my lungs black. And now, you know, they have all these fancy twist tops. You got all these different types of waxes. You got so much higher quality of, you know, actual flower. You have all, you know, a different drink, you have different foods. I'm excited to see the different ways they're going to be able to incorporate cannabis into, you know, different items, A. And B, you know, I'm really excited about hemp. I'm super excited about hemp. I'd love to honestly understand it a little bit more. I've been trying to really, you know, see how I can make my mark with it. One of the
You're talking about industrial hemp, right?
Industrial hemp, yes.
Oh, yeah.
One of my co-founders of Green Wolverine, she's, you know, super big on the industrial hemp and thinks it's, you know, about to just completely change the world. I think it's going to replace plastics. I hope it replaces plastics in some way. And I really think it's going to be huge for clothing too, and just any types of reusables like garbage bags, things like that. So, you know, just excited to see where the future goes with that and what kind of industry that turns into.
Dude, I couldn't agree with you more. That's where I'm most excited. Listen, I'm a cannabis user. I love it, but I'm more excited about the industrial hemp space. I think it's going to be revolutionary. I think that's truly what's going to bring, I mean, it's either going to solidify this country as a superpower for the next 50 years or so, or at least bring us back there. I don't know how the general opinion is of us being a superpower, but
it should, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. I actually got introduced to a company that is doing hemp fibers for textiles, and they're working on getting them on the show, and I'm really excited about that episode. So I'm really looking forward to that. And like I said, I issue this challenge every time we talk about industrial hemp. Somebody make a freaking hemp straw, sell it to Starbucks, because I'm over these paper straws. I hate it. City of Delray Beach, You suck. You mandated paper straws. Paper straws suck. I go through 5 of them to get through one drink. Give me my plastic back, or let's look at hemp.
No, we got to look at hemp. I'm definitely not about the plastic straws. So, I mean, we'll disagree there. I hate the paper straws, though. I do understand where you're coming from. I do go through 2 every time I have like an iced coffee or something. But at least we're not crushing the environment. But I do think the hemp, we do need a hemp.
We're killing trees to make straws, man.
I know. Everything's bad. That's my other, my cynical take. Everything's bad. Everything's bad for you and bad for the environment.
Oh man, well, cannabis is going to fix all of that, of course. So
that's what I say, people think I'm crazy. Cannabis fixes everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is we can say that crazy kind of stuff, but we usually have a few things to back it up. So,
yeah.
Listen, man, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm glad that you got the gig at Entourage. I think you guys do a great job. I'm glad that I'm friends with most of you. Tell everybody I said hi back at the office. Make sure you share this episode with them. Make sure they blast it out on all their social medias too. And before we let you go, let's get all the promotions in, any social media, anything that you have coming up.
You could just follow me on LinkedIn at, Laurence Horowitz. I'm on Instagram also, LJ_Horowitz, and Facebook too, Twitter as well, LJ_Horowitz. I just post about cannabis business and my personal life, nothing too crazy. But if you want to check out Entourage Effect Capital, feel free to go to entourageeffectcapital.com and you can learn more about us there. And if you ever want to have me back on the show, and I'm happy to be a guest. This was awesome. I loved it. And I loved meeting you too, for the first time in person or whatever this is, over Zoom.
Yeah, man.
It's only emails before and texts.
No, we will definitely do something again. Hopefully in person if we can. If not, in another location for yourself, man. Thank you for doing the show. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we'll definitely have you back. It's been fun.
Absolutely, man. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, again at home. This has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind. Like I said, tune in Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on Facebook.com/Cannabis Group. Today on our YouTube page, we launched Mark Wasserman, part of the Pot Brothers at Law, and then also one that's near and dear to my heart because it's the first podcast they ever did, Pete and Pete Furtado, senior and junior from Big Pete's Treats out in California. It was a great episode. Go check it out, youtube.com/elevateyourgrind. You can actually find the podcast on the C-Lab website now. It's joinclab.com/elevateyourgrind. I think there might be a dash in between elevate your and grind. Try it both ways. Let me know what works. It literally just popped up, so I don't have the actual URL yet, but it's joinclab.com/elevateyourgrind. Maybe elevate-your-grind. We'll figure that out together. Folks, this has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind. We'll see you on Thursday.